Today we're going to talk about two gemstones that a lot of people probably haven't even heard of, which is kind of exciting, and that is Tsavorite and demantoid garnets. Now, when most people think of garnets, of course, they tend to think of what's pictured as the birthstone for January on birthstone charts, which is the typical kind of dark red gemstone. And in the trade, these are sometimes labeled as pyrope or almandine or rhodolite garnets. And they're very common because they're found on every single continent. But both demantoid and Tsavorite garnets are actually green garnets. And the really cool thing about garnets is that they're a whole group of minerals, not just a species or a variety. So they have a lot of different variety in their chemical compositions, and they can be found in almost every color. And these green garnets are actually some of the most rare and valuable gemstones, period, not just in the garnet category. Now, both demantoid and Tsavorite garnets come in very saturated green colors, and they very much rival emeralds, but they have two amazing qualities that even emeralds don't have. And that is that they're usually very low in inclusion, so they have very high clarity and high transparency, and they're almost never treated, which definitely is not the case when it comes to emeralds. Now, while Tsavorite garnet definitely sounds like it has a more Russian type of name, demantoid garnet is actually the one with a ton of really interesting Russian history. Even on top of all of its history, probably the most interesting thing that sets demantoid garnet apart is that it has an even higher dispersion rate than diamond, and that means that it has a ton of fire, ton of light reflection, and that all equals a ton of sparkle. And this is very rare for a colored gemstone, so it really sets demantoid garnet apart. It makes it very, very highly sought after on the market because it's very eye-catching and really, really beautiful, especially when it has high quality green saturated color. Another thing that makes collectors especially very interested in demantoid garnet is that it does get its green color from chromium. And chromium is a very rare element that appears on Earth, and it's the same element that gives emerald its green color, as well as alexandrite. And alexandrite, of course, is one of the rarest gems in the world, and it's also one of those gems that has a ton of amazing Russian history. So in my opinion, when we're comparing demantoid and Tsavorite garnets, one of the first things I look for is that kind of bluish green color, which is more similar to a chromium-rich emerald. And you can find demantoid garnets in kind of yellowish or brownish colors. Those are definitely less rare and less desirable. But if I'm comparing a Tsavorite and a demantoid, the one that has that more kind of bluish emerald color is the one that tends to be demantoid garnet. As mentioned, demantoid garnet was actually first discovered in the 1880s in Russia's Ural Mountains. And the Ural Mountains are a very interesting place for gemstones in the industry. They're known for their beautiful metamorphic conditions, and a lot of very famous historical gems have come out of this area, including pink topaz, which is now sometimes called imperial topaz. And you can watch our video on that for more information, as well as alexandrite, which is similar to pink topaz. Demantoid garnet became very, very popular with the Romanovs, the Russian imperial family, and Tsar Nicholas II really loved demantoid garnet, and he commissioned a lot of important jewelry pieces for his wife with demantoid garnet, and because of that, it became a very popular gemstone used by Fabergé. So of course, this gave it kind of a lot of status and allure, and it did become a bit of a status symbol and was seen a lot in Victorian and Edwardian jewelry in other parts of Europe after that. Last but not least, as if demantoid garnet didn't have enough very unique characteristics, it's also the only gemstone on Earth that has ever been found with a horsetail inclusion. And these are basically a curve of silky kind of rutile inclusions that can be found in the gemstone. They often have a very gold appearance, which contrasts beautifully with the green background. And they do radiate out kind of, again, in a curve with lots of little lines is what it looks like. So it kind of looks like a comet or, of course, a horsetail. And it is the only gemstone that has been found with this inclusion. So when gems come onto the market with that inclusion, cutters definitely try to show it off, and it can increase the value of the stone because, again, it's a bit of a collector's item and definitely a one-of-a-kind trait. Now, the other green garnet that we're going to talk about is Tsavorite garnet, and it is perhaps a little bit less sought after, maybe a little bit less rare than demantoid, but it is a very important gem in the industry, and it's very interesting because it was actually only found in the 1960s, so it's relatively new on the market and yet has become very sought after as well. As mentioned before, when I'm looking at Tsavorite garnets compared to demantoid garnets, I personally am looking for a little bit more of a yellowish tint. For me, that's kind of what sets them apart. And they do get their green color from vanadium instead of chromium. And while emeralds can be colored by both chromium and vanadium, they're definitely more popular for that kind of chromium bluish green color. So again, if I'm looking at those two green garnets side by side, the one that tends to have a little bit more yellowish color and let's say look more like a green tourmaline versus an emerald, that's the one that I would usually call out as being a Tsavorite garnet just from looking at it with my eye. The other thing that I think makes Tsavorite garnets very similar to green tourmalines is that once you get into the larger carat sizes, you have to be careful that they can show a lot of extinction. So they can sometimes get very dark in tone, and you're gonna maybe have areas in the stone that are so dark they look almost black, and those are areas that have zero light reflection, and tourmalines can definitely have that trait as well. So when you're looking at a Tsavorite garnet, you want it to be, very bright, very light reflecting, and have that beautiful saturated green color with lots of light reflection and sparkle. Currently, most Tsavorite garnets are coming out of East Africa, so we're seeing them come out of Tanzania and Madagascar and Kenya, and sometimes Pakistan as well, but that is definitely a little less common. On the flip side, demantoid garnets are also coming out of East Africa a lot, but in general, their sources have been much more inconsistent over the years. And this has definitely contributed to how rare they are and how expensive they can be because the sources are just kind of a little bit all over the map, quite literally. Demantoid garnets can still be found in Russia. However, they don't really come onto the market all that often as far as like newly mined stones coming out of Russia. And they can be found kind of in spotty areas all over Europe as well. So they can be found in Italy and Greece and some areas even in Iran and Mexico. The other thing these stones have in common is that we don't find them in large carat sizes. So we're mostly finding them really small sizes, and they're still being very much used more as accent stones by very high-end designers or in even pave designs. Obviously their saturated color and high level of sparkle really contributes to that. So they're really beautiful in those types of small stone designs. But we really don't see them over 3 carats, and especially in a very high quality saturated color without that darkness or too much yellowish or brownish tint or very low saturation. In fact, sometimes when you find a Tsavorite garnet that is kind of yellowish or very low saturation, so it's kind of like more of a watercolory type of tone, it's simply labeled as a grossular garnet instead of a Tsavorite. Because overall, both of these green garnets are spectacular stones. They're known as being collector's items, and if you can find them in high qualities, they have so much history and interesting characteristics that they would make an amazing addition to any jewelry collection. And especially if you have a January birthday, this is definitely something to consider instead of maybe one of your run-of-the-mill red garnets. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to learn more about gems and jewelry, be sure to visit us on our main page at winstongemsandjewelry.com.